Welcome back to My Time to Fly. If you're new here, this is a channel focused on the amazing world of general aviation. Make sure you check out some of my recent videos to see what it's all about. My favorite part of this channel is the opportunity to interact with the community. So don't hesitate to ask questions and interact with other aviation enthusiasts in the comments below. Today, I'm going to chat about the costs of flying general aviation airplanes. I get the question a lot. What would it cost to fly me somewhere? So I thought it would be great to provide some details. Specifically, I used my most recent trip in my Mooney, the footage of which you're seeing right now, as a good example of what a typical trip would cost. And I'll quickly compare it to other transportation options that we might readily use. Some quick details on the trip. It was about 700 nautical miles total flying distance. It was from my home airport, Sparta, Michigan, to the St. Louis area in Missouri. There's a few airports around the St. Louis area. We flew into St. Louis downtown. We left on a Friday morning, and we spent 2 nights in St. Louis for a motorsports event, coming back Sunday morning. Total time flying in the Mooney was just about 6 hours. I think it was actually 5.1 on the tack, but about 6 hours on the clock. So next I'll detail some of the line item costs that go into flying in general aviation. First and foremost, the big one, fuel. Now my Mooney's fairly efficient for the speed that we get, and over this trip we burned about 56 gallons. Now, of course, fuel costs vary wildly from airport to airport, and this is a good example. At my home airport, I'm paying $4.75 a gallon right now, and at St. Louis downtown for full service, we paid $6.89. That was a little bit of a shell shock for me. So anyways, total gas for the trip was about $335. We also burned about a quart of oil over the trip, which is common in these airplanes. Call that $10. No big deal there. Now I did make a decision, especially being in the St. Louis area, not St. Louis specifically, but being in, I don't know what's known as maybe Tornado Alley or close to it, that I was going to put the airplane in a hangar. Just, you never knew what kind of weather might pop up. So we used a local FBO at the airport, and I had called them ahead of time and emailed and made sure that they knew I was coming, and worked out what I thought was a pretty fair rate of $75 a night for the hangar. So 2 nights in a hangar at $75 a night is another $150. Now I'm sure I could have done it cheaper. I didn't have to put it in the hangar, but for me, that $150 was well worth the peace of mind. And then one that always kind of crops up on you, you know you're going to have to pay for it, but it kind of hurts a little bit, is just the fact that once you get on the ground, you've got to find a way to get where you're going. So ground transportation can certainly add up. Now, if you're just going for a day trip or just going to spend a couple hours in a town, there's usually a lot of options to use what might be called a crew car or a courtesy car at some airports. To use that really free of charge, which is a nice thing in general aviation. But we knew we were going to be there for quite some time, a couple days, so we had to choose our own way around town. So, of course, we used ride-sharing services like Uber, and we accrued a cost of about $132 in transportation. So, all told, our trip cost using the Mooney about $630. Now, I didn't include some of the things that would have been the same regardless of how we traveled. Things like the hotel we used or the cost of the event, any of that stuff. But the actual travel cost was right around $630 in the Mooney. So just to back that up and kind of compare it to our other options, of course, you always have the option to drive. In this case, the trip would have been about 15 hours of driving instead of the 6 hours of flying. Again, that's round trip. and it would have been about 930 miles. Now, my best option for getting down and back would have been my truck, which gets right around 17 miles a gallon. I do have a vehicle that gets much better fuel mileage than that, but it is my wife's, and she definitely needed it. So we would have used my truck. It is diesel. Diesel is running about $3.25 a gallon right now, and I easily would have burned 55 gallons, which is about $180 in fuel. One other expense we would have had that we didn't incur because we used Uber was parking fees at the event, and that would have been about $10. Pretty insignificant. So the cost to drive ourselves would have been much lower than flying. I've got it at right about $190 instead of the $630. So clearly, much more cost effective, but definitely a little bit longer. The last option, of course, would have been flying, using an airline, flying commercially. It's really hard to put an exact amount of time it would have taken to fly commercially because you have to add in all of the arrive early, go through security, not knowing exactly what you're going to run into. So I just didn't even put time as a factor. I figured the airline would probably be just about equal to, or maybe just a little bit more than flying ourselves. But from a cost perspective, of course I'm doing this in retrospect, so I can only use current costs. But with just a quick search on the old Google, it looks like we could have got tickets for about $317 a piece. There was two of us, so about $635 in tickets. And of course we would have had to go through the same ground transportation problem. Perhaps we could have rented a vehicle because we would have been at a bigger airport, but it's likely we would have just used Uber as well. So it would have been somewhere in the area of about $770 as compared to the $600, or just a little over, to fly ourselves. So I think it's pretty clear. It's not the most cost-effective way. Now, there's things we could have done to reduce the cost. Like I said, not putting it in a hangar. Or spread the costs out. You know, if I put a third guy in the airplane, of course you're saving incremental money there because everybody's chipping in. But you would also get that advantage in a car. Now, where it really starts to shine is if you're going to use the airplane as opposed to flying commercially, because you don't have to buy that extra ticket. Now, all this to say, there's some very clear regulations about being able to take money to fly in general aviation, and without a commercial pilot's license, that is not allowed. People can pay up to their fair share, so one passenger could pay 50% of the cost. If you had two passengers, they could each pay 33% of the cost. But as a pilot in general aviation, we have to pay our share as well. All that to be said, I thought I'd just quick give this breakdown of the costs in general aviation. This is just an example using my airplane, the Mooney. Again, the Mooney's quite efficient, and other airplanes might not be quite that efficient, and costs could vary quite a bit. But just a good example, and I hope you enjoyed it. Again, if you're new to the channel, poke around, see what you like, leave some comments, let me know other stuff that you'd like to see, other content you'd like to see, and I hope you enjoy what you find. Thanks again. We'll talk to you all real soon.